Authentication is hard, and getting it right is even harder. So let's get it right in Remix. Understanding the request lifecycle is the most important piece of information that we need to know before we actually authenticate our routes. So first let's go over how it works in Remix, or generally the web. We have the browser here, and we have the server here. And what we want to do is make a request to our server and for the server to send something back to us. And how it generally works is, if you have a route that's localhost 3000/pre, we want to make a request to the server that's located on this URL. And how that works is, let's imagine that we have a nested route. So for example, we have 3 segments to the URL, pre, cut, and watermelon. And all of these have a loader. So what is going to happen is, all of these are going to send parallel requests to the server, and they are going to execute at the same time, which means all of these routes are requesting resources from the server at the same time, and we don't know which one is going to finish first and which one is going to finish last. So these requests go to the server, and what the server does is, it sends the request to Remix. If you haven't watched my previous video on what Remix is, this is the perfect chance for you to do that, to understand what's going on in this part. If you have, I won't be covering that in this video, so let's move on. What's gonna happen now is the server is gonna send the requests to Remix. They are going to hit the loaders. So the requests here are going to go into their corresponding loaders. The loaders are gonna process those requests, and they're gonna send back responses to the server. And the server here is going to basically parse those responses and then send them back to the browser. That is the life cycle of the whole process. So the browser has a URL. The URL has its segments. These segments have loaders. These loaders go to the server. The server sends those requests to their loaders, and then the loaders respond to the server, and then the server responds to the browser. And this is the magic circle of how requests work. Now that we understand how requests work, let's see how you can authenticate the requests. So we start again with the same example. We have our server and we have our browser. And what we want to do is, when we're on a route, for example, called login, so we have localhost 3000/login, and we want to send a request to our server. What we're gonna do is, on this route, we're gonna enter our information into a form, for example, our email and password. And what's gonna happen is, when we click submit, the request is going to be sent to the server. The server will get a post request here, and it's going to send it further to Remix. And because Remix has actions that handle these kinds of events, what we're gonna do here is pass it from the server to the action, and the action is going to do the following. It's going to take this post information and parse it from the form data, or however you submitted it. If it's JSON, it's gonna parse it from JSON. And what's gonna happen after that is, it's going to use utilities from Remix to create a cookie. And it's going to send a response to the server with that cookie already set in the headers. And if we see here, the server gets this, but the browser doesn't have it yet. So the server responds to the browser as well with this cookie that we sent to the server. And what's going to happen on the browser is, and this is generally how it works everywhere on every browser, is it's going to take this cookie and it's going to store it inside of its storage. And whenever you send requests to your server after the fact, it's automatically going to send the cookie along with it. So all the following requests to the server are gonna have this cookie set again. And that's how we authenticate our users. We send the post request to the server here. The server gives it to Remix. Remix does something with this and returns a cookie. And then we store this cookie in the browser, which is automatically going to send it along with every new request, so we can further parse it on our backend. Alright, and now for the last part that we need to cover before we actually get to the code, is the path that happens after we give the browser the cookie. So, let's assume our cookie holds the user information. For example, we've stored the user ID in the cookie. The cookie is then going to be used on every request, and how that's gonna work is it's going to be set as the cookie header whenever we make the request to our server. So if we imagine that we're on the dashboard route, the cookie is going to be sent along to the loader, and this route is gonna send the request with the header to the server. So our cookie is automatically attached, so we don't have to do anything in this case. And then our server sends this information to our loader. And what the loader is gonna do is, it's going to have a guard. So let's imagine that the dashboard route requires you to be logged in to fetch the current user's information and show it to him. So what we're gonna do in the loader is have a require user guard. And what's that gonna do is it's going to take this cookie from the request and say, okay, is this cookie valid? If it's not, it's going to throw the user to the login page. But if it is, the cookie is valid, we're gonna get the request, do something with it, fetch the data, and then send it back to the server. And then the server is naturally going to send this information to the browser. And that's the whole flow that's going to happen after we log the user in. Now that we fully understand how authentication works in Remix, let's implement it. So I've created a repository for us so we can explore authentication in Remix, and I'm going to leave it in the description below if you want to follow. And I'll be going step by step on how you can implement everything you need for authentication inside of Remix here. The first thing we're gonna go over is the route structure. So we have the index route here and the login layout, and then a few pages here. For our purposes, we're going to focus on the register page and the login page. So let's first create the use case where we register the user. Alright, so before we jump into the implementation on the backend, I just want to say that I've already prepared the front end. So we import the form from Remix here, as you can see, from Remix.run/React, and this form is gonna submit a post request to the current route. So the current route's action is going to be hit with whatever form data we submit here. And I've added two inputs here. The first one is for the email and the second one is for the password. So I won't be going into every edge case and how to do error handling and stuff like that. I'll just show you the happy path and how it generally works. If you want me to do a video on that topic, I'd love to. Just write in the comments and I'll do it. If you have any Remix Auth strategies you'd like to see me implement, or you want to learn how to use Remix Auth to authenticate your users, I can also do a video on that. But for now, let's move on with our simple example. So as we said, it's going to submit the email and the password to our backend. When the action is hit, we're going to get a request. And what we want to do here is basically say, I want to grab the form data. So how we're gonna do that is we're going to await the request form data here. And then we're gonna get the email and the password here. And I've already prepared some helper methods to help us out here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna import the create user method from the models. And we're just gonna give it the email and the password. And what's that gonna do is it's going to create a user for us. So let's say const user is equal to create user. And what this user is here is basically let me await this. So what this user is it's basically the whole user object. So ID, email, name, password, created at, updated at. You can filter it and make it a little bit smarter. I just made it create the user without checking if the email is unique, without hashing the password, which is obviously not good. But for the sake of the example, just bear with me. Now that we've created the user, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create that cookie I talked about earlier. So how do we do that? Well, it's pretty simple. all you have to do is create a cookie session using Remix utilities, and let's create a new file, and I'll show you how to do that right now. I'll create the session folder here, and inside of it I'm just gonna create a new file called session.server.ts. Alright, so for the first thing we're gonna do inside of here is we're gonna create a cookie session storage, and this is imported from Remix.run/node. If you want to use a different adapter you can, it's really up to you, but I'll be using node for this example, and I've already prepared some of the values I want to have just for the sake of speed. So you can pass in a cookie parameter here, and it takes all the values that you can find on MDN docs. As I've already said a million times, MDN docs is the best place for you to go if you're working with Remix. So this is going to be passed to the cookie, and let's go over the fields now and explain what they are. So the name is the name of the authentication cookie, or rather the cookie itself. In our case we're gonna call it authentication. The max age here is how long the cookie is going to be active for before it automatically expires. So the good thing here is if you don't want your user to log out after a while, what you can do is basically not set this, and the cookie is going to last forever, but it's really up to you. If you want to do it for 30 days, this is the way to do it. You can do it for a longer period, for a shorter period, it's really up to you. For now, I'll remove the path attribute, but if you hover over any field, I just wanted to show you this. So whenever you hover over it, it's going to tell you what it is, and if you click here, it's going to take you to the official cookie documentation where you can find more information. But the other important thing here is the HTTP only set to true. This means that no client-side JavaScript can tamper with the cookie, so only you have access to it, or rather the HTTP protocol. And same site is always set to lax because there are some issues with CORS that might impact your cookies. You can play around with this and make it more strict, but for the sake of the example we're gonna go with lax. So if it's secure or not, we usually do the check if it's production or not, because we don't really care locally if it's secure. And the secrets here is an array of strings that you pass into the secrets, and it's going to hash the cookie with all of the strings provided, so you can add security as much as you want. For now we're just gonna use this dummy array here because it doesn't really matter in our case, but you get the point. Alright, so the first thing we're gonna do here is, now that we've created the user, we want to store the user in the session. So how we can do that is basically, let's create a method called store user in session. It's going to be async, and what it's gonna take is going to take in the user, and we're gonna import the user type from Prisma, and we're just gonna pick the user ID here. So it's a good idea not to store sensitive information into your session, obviously, and because user information can change, what I recommend that you do is just store the user ID, use that user ID to get it later from the database instead of keeping it in the cookie and exposing yourself to a possibility that the data is stale. As I said, if we want to store the user in the session, what we need to do is create a cookie and give it back to the browser. So we're gonna do that by doing the following. We're gonna create a session, we're gonna get the session, we're going to set the user ID inside of it, and then we're going to use the commit session helper here to create a cookie header that we're gonna give back to our response. And what that's gonna do is send it back to the browser, and the browser is going to automatically set that cookie. So now that we have the committed session header cookie, what we're gonna do with this is we're gonna go back to the register route, but first I'm gonna export this, obviously, and then we're gonna get the session header here. by getting it from the store user in session helper here. Because we created the user already, we just give it the user. And then instead of returning null, we're gonna return a redirect to the dashboard page that we're gonna create right after this one. And the second argument to the redirect function is the response initializer. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna set the cookie header to the session header. And this will set the cookie in the browser, and we're gonna be able to send it along the following requests, and it's going to be inside of there, so we can use the guard to actually get it and do something with it. So the process of setting the cookie is done. So now we need guards to make sure that the requests that are coming in don't go through if they're not validated and authenticated. So how we do that is we create guards. So in our case, we're gonna use the user ID from the cookie to get the user from the database, and if he doesn't exist, we're gonna redirect to another page. So let's first create the guards.server.ts file, and after that we're gonna go to the session.server.ts file, and we need another method here that's going to be called getUserFromSession. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a getUser. Well, actually we're gonna do getUserID from session, and this will take in one argument, and that's the current request. So because the request will have the cookie header set already, we're gonna pass that to the get session here, and that's going to parse our session information. We're gonna get the user ID from the session, and then we're gonna give it back. And now if we go to the guards.server.ts, what we can do here is create a require user guard. So require user, and that's also going to take the request object as the first parameter, and we're gonna get the user ID here by getting it from the session. So get user ID from session, and we give it the request, and we also make this asynchronous. And now that we are getting the user ID here, what we're gonna do is, because this can either be set or not, we're gonna say if not user ID, return a redirect to login, obviously. This is going to mean if the request does not have the cookie, we're just gonna redirect back to login, because it means the user is not logged in. The next step is, let's get the user from the database. So we get the user by getting it from the database. I already created another utility that takes the user ID in and then gives us the user. So also if the user is not set, we're also going to redirect to the login. Otherwise we're going to return the user. So what this function does is it takes the loader request, authenticates it by making sure that the cookie is there, it has the valid user ID, and the user actually exists in the database. So whenever we use this, it's going to make sure that the request coming in is authenticated. And how we can use this is if we create a new file. So we're gonna generate a new remix route, and we're gonna call it dashboard, and we're gonna say it has a loader, and after it's generated, inside of here, what we're gonna do is, here we're gonna say require user, and we're gonna give it a request. And now we're gonna wait this, and we get the user here. And let's also make sure, I just realized that I was returning these. We want to throw these, because we want to throw the user to the login page instead of return this, because otherwise you would return inside of this guard, and on the dashboard this would either be a response or the user, but we want to throw the user back to the login if he's not authenticated. At this point, if we hover over this, we actually get the user object back. And there we have it. We have a fully authenticated user at this point, and then we can do whatever we need to do after the authentication is done. Alright, and let's see our demo in action now. So, I'm on the login page, and I'm gonna switch to register. I'm going to enter an email, so just a random email. And I'm just gonna put in a random password. And when I click register, we should end on the dashboard route, and I should be authenticated. So let's try it out. And as you can see, I'm now on the dashboard route, I'm authenticated, and if I open up the Chrome DevTools and go to application, so you can see the storage here, and if we look at our cookies, you can see that I've set the authentication header, it has all the properties I've shown you, and the value here is encrypted, and this basically holds our user ID. And that's pretty much it. Isn't that cool? And the best part here is that you don't have to really use this in Remix, you can use it in any application, because this is just a web standard, and this is how you usually authenticate across some services. Either this, or you send authentication headers and then use JWT, but you can also do that in Remix by saving the JWT token and then sending that to the third-party API that you're authenticating across, instead of just using the user ID as we did in the demo. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video and had as much fun as I did. It was really awesome making this one, and I put a lot of effort into graphs and explaining how it works under the hood. This is obviously all web standards, so you can use this method across the web, not just Remix, and that's the best part about it. Again, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye!